Good morning. Good morning, Bill. Bill, if you'll take control of that table back there, we'll get started. Good morning and welcome all this fine morning. Nice to see you here. Let's open with a word of prayer. Gracious God, what a morning to make our way to Trinity to join longtime friends, new friends, to share a meal and to hear our speaker describe the good work that she does. We pray for all those who still suffer in the aftermath of the hurricanes. We pray for those in our congregation who are dealing with health issues. And we pray for an outbreak of respect and dignity in this time of division and rancor in our country. All these things we pray in Christ's name. Amen. So, do we have any announcements this morning? Jim Gober has one.
I want to introduce our speaker for next Friday. His name is Tim White. He's right there. If you are one of those people that's concerned about where you go to if you don't like the election result, Tim's going to tell you all about it. His topic is, how big is the universe?
Well, Tim, we'll look forward to that, hearing you expand on that topic. John shakes his head. Any other announcements for the group this morning? Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Amy Ard, our speaker today. And I'll tell you that Amy is an Atlanta native. She was educated at Denison University in Granville, Ohio, and Vanderbilt Divinity School, that football powerhouse, Vanderbilt. She is a certified childbirth doula, and I'm going to confess that I was unfamiliar with that word. Fortunately, it hasn't come up in Wordle. And I hope you'll tell us a little bit about the origin of that term. Amy is the executive director of Motherhood Beyond Bars. And prior to that position, in 2014, she founded DC Birth Doulas, which was the largest childbirth support agency in Washington, D.C. Amy has 3 children and a new puppy. And Amy's husband, Michael Waller, is with the Georgia Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. And I am curious about what he does at that agency. So with that, I will turn things over to Amy Ard.
Thank you. I know it's a good day because I got Wordle in 3 this morning. Almost got it in 2. I'm honored to be here. Thank you. And that was a delicious breakfast. I usually, and hello to our friends joining on Zoom as well, see that you're there. I usually start these presentations by saying that I have never spent time in prison as an incarcerated person, but I love a lot of people who are there. And they can't be here today for the most part. And so usually when I talk to groups, I bring them with me in the form of an origami heart, which turned out to be the logo for our organization. And I wouldn't normally tell the same story. Tom is sitting here. He's heard a lot of this before, but I have an update about the woman whose story is represented by this heart today. And her name is Danielle. And I met her in the first time I ever walked into a prison. I walked into Lee Arundel State Prison, which is in Alto, Georgia, the largest women's prison. And I was escorted by the chaplain, Susan Bishop, and some of you may know her, that she has a choir that often performs in churches. She escorted me through a sprawling campus. It took about 20 minutes to get to the education room. And then I walked into a room and she left. And later, in another minute, about 14 women walked in. And we just stared at one another. And I had never taught in a prison before. These were a postpartum support group. And one of the women in there was named Danielle. And Danielle didn't have a very long sentence. By the time I met her, just probably about 6 months left. And when she left prison, we stayed in touch. And she was really anxious to reconnect with her daughter. The person that had picked up her baby from the hospital when Danielle gave birth was the paternal grandmother. So Danielle had burned a lot of bridges with her family. She had a substance use disorder. For people who have worked with addiction in your family, you know that it's a very fast way to burn bridges with family members. So the paternal grandmother had Danielle's little girl, and she was anxious to get back connected with her daughter, but the paternal grandmother was making that very hard. And Danielle, about 6-7 months after she got out of prison, called me one day and she said, I've got a court notice and I have to go to court. And the grandmother is filing for permanent custody of my little girl. And Danielle had done everything she could do to go through all of the coursework that she needed to do parenting classes. And I got a kind of a sick feeling in my stomach. And I said, I want you to call me the minute you get out of that court hearing. And what happened at that court hearing was the grandmother was awarded full custody of the child with no visitation rights for Danielle. And it didn't take long for Danielle's conversations with me over the phone to get a little bit more troubling. Danielle was devastated and had a hard time remaining sober in her sobriety. And about a year later, 6 months later, Danielle was in a relationship where she was being abused. I heard that she was in a hotel room. She told me there was a warrant out for her arrest. And I said, you have to go turn yourself in. And my next phone call from her was Monroe County Jail. I saw it come up on my phone, Monroe County, and I knew who would be on the other end of that. And it was Danielle. And she hadn't turned herself in. She had stolen from Walmart and they'd caught her in the parking lot. And she was devastated and I was devastated. And also she was pregnant. And I said, Danielle, this time we're going to try something different. And so we worked together with her public defender. I went to the courthouse in Monroe when she was there for sentencing. And we found a treatment program in Augusta called Hope House that was willing to take pregnant women. The baby could stay with the mom after she delivered. And we made a case to the judge that day that they tried a lot of things with Danielle. My time I met her in prison was not the first time she had been there. But one thing we had never tried was treatment. And let's give that a try this time. And the judge agreed. And so Danielle went pregnant to Hope House in Augusta. The little girl that you see, the older little girl there was born at Hope House. And within a few months after she was born, Billy Faye is her name, Danielle was sending me pictures of her teaching a prenatal yoga class at Hope House for all of the other pregnant women that were there. She graduated from the program. Her partner also graduated from a rehab. And the program put her in housing and helped pay for her housing and helped find a job there in Augusta. And so the little boy Wilder that you see on her lap was born in stable housing with 2 parents, and they are thriving. This week, or just after the hurricane came through, we had a tragic situation with one of our families. We had a dad who had picked up his baby from the hospital. The baby was 2 months old, and he went into the baby's room one morning and he was unresponsive. And he had died of SIDS. 2-month-old baby, and the mom in prison had not even heard the word yet. We knew that she didn't know. And the first person that we called was Danielle, because Danielle lived down the street, just very close to that family who had just gotten the worst news that a family can get. And Danielle went to the home and asked how she could be helpful. And she gathered all of the baby's clothing. And then yesterday she called me right after the service. She was sobbing. And she said, we are just all family. We are all family. And last night she called me again with the idea that she would take the baby Gunter is his name, baby Gunter's clothing, and turn it into a quilt so that when the mom came home from prison, she would have a quilt made of her baby's clothes. When I told this story the first time, none of baby Gunter's story was part of it, but I tell it now, and actually quite emotionally, to say that what Motherhood Beyond Bars does, more than any other thing, we do a lot of stuff, and I'll talk about it, is we build authentic relationships that transform lives. And Danielle's story, I think from beginning to end, she is now giving back to the community that she was once so distanced from. And I think that's the magic of the work that we do. I want to center a little bit of our work in just some numbers and tell you why it's important that we work with pregnant, incarcerated women and their infants and caregivers. There's been an 800% increase in the number of women behind bars in the United States over the last 4 decades. So over the last 40 years, 800% increase. We hear a lot about decarceration rates. That's true mostly for men. For women, that hasn't been the same story. And the problem is that we actually do not have any data about how many of these women are pregnant when they come into the system. There's a fantastic researcher who says we count people that count. And we don't think that women, especially pregnant women in prison or jails, count much because we don't even care to find out how many of them there are. We know that women, when they are locked up, the majority of them are in local jails, and then the rest are in state prison systems. A small part are in federal prisons, immigration detentions, or youth detention centers. In Georgia, 159 counties. We know that most of the women who are arrested are in jails. There is no data collection about who is pregnant or how many people are pregnant in jails. There's no place you can go to find that out. We do know a little bit about state prisons, and we'll get to that. We do know that the people that are in prisons have grown up in pretty rough circumstances. So when we talk about breaking cycles of incarceration in families, it's because we understand that if you had a parent in prison, unfortunately, that's predictive of you going to prison one day. And when I walked into that postpartum support group and was sitting in a circle of women one day, there were 14 women in our circle. And I said, how many of you had a parent in prison growing up? 13 women's hands went up. Out of 14 women, 13 of them had a parent in prison when they were growing up, and they had just given birth to the next generation. And that was a real aha moment for me. I thought, whatever we think we are doing in this place and with this system is not working. We have to try something different because this is madness. We know that there are a large number who were in foster care. And then we know that there are a large number who did not complete high school. So 62% of the people growing up in prisons did not complete high school, and a large majority of them were quite poor. 42% received public assistance. We also know specifically for women, and this is data that comes directly from the Georgia Department of Corrections, that there are a large number of women who come into the prison system, and this is one of the differentiating factors between men and women who have mental health issues. So this is the GDC's own data, and it's got male here, female here. 82% of the women coming into the prison systems were identified as having a mental health condition before they came in. When they get to prison, they're faced with a very, very under-resourced prison support system. So there's about 400 women to every 1 mental health counselor in prison. And that means that often women will spend their entire sentence without receiving any mental health care when they're there. So we know actually when you say we count people that count, we have no idea how many pregnant women are in our jails. We know very little, and I will say we knew very little about what happens to infants after they were born, but we do know that there are a lot of them. So 80% of women in jail are mothers to dependent children. 2.9 women are jailed every year. Over 2.7 million have had a parent in jail or prison. And when we go back to that other statistic, 33% of them may end up in prison one day. And 10 million children have had a parent behind bars in their lifetime. That's a lot of kids. And what that translates into for our communities is that there is one child in every single classroom in the United States that has a parent in prison. And statistically, we know that there are some classrooms where more than one child has one. And my mother, who I grew up in Atlanta, I live in the house that I was born in with my mom and 3 kids and a husband and now 2 dogs and 1 bathroom. I was glad to get up early this morning. 2 bathrooms. My mom gets one, the rest of us share one. My mom was a teacher in Atlanta public schools. She taught at Bethune Elementary, which is now, I think, Michelle and Barack Obama Academy on Northside Drive. And she was a reading specialist, and reading specialist means you get to do bus duty and playground duty and lunchroom duty as well. So she was often on the playground duty. And long before I started doing this work, she would tell stories of being out there during the playground time, and the kids would see and hear the white prison buses driving down Northside Drive, and she would watch children race to the edge of the playground to try and wave to someone that they knew, a loved one, a family member, a father. And this was just an overwhelming image for her. And I think about that every time I see this, is that children are a very, very often unseen victim of our mass incarceration epidemic. So what happens when a mother gets arrested? And this is different than when a father gets arrested. So when a father gets arrested, there is generally a network of women, including the mother and some grandparents, that step in to care for those children while the father is away. A woman is lucky if there is one person on the outside willing to support her family while she goes. And that is why children who have a mother in prison are 5 times more likely to end up in our foster care system than when the father is arrested. And the experience of being pregnant in prison is not one that probably we would wish on anyone, regardless of what they have done. Our prisons were not designed for women. They certainly were not designed for pregnant women. So when the first pregnant woman showed up in a prison, I can imagine there was just mass chaos. They did not know what to do. And we can see that sometimes in our county jails. Our county jails, when they have someone who is very pregnant, and they're unable to figure out what to do with her, when it comes time to deliver in these small county jails, there is panic and chaos. They cannot tell the family members where the woman will deliver the baby. They can't tell the family members what will happen after the baby is born. They're just none of the programs were designed to have this happen. That picture had a woman who was chained to a bed in Georgia. Until 2019, it was legal to shackle women during their pregnancy, during their birth, and during their postpartum. This legislation twice had been brought up before the Georgia legislature, and 2 times it had failed. And I will stop here and tell a little bit of my story. I was a childbirth doula, and doulas are non-medical professionals. So you've heard of midwives. Midwives are medical professionals. Doulas are trained to support a family, or generally hired by the family. So it's not part of a hospital or medical system. And we're there to support you through pregnancy, the actual birth, and a little bit afterwards. And I was attending a birth as a doula in a Washington, D.C. hospital. And my clients were very, very well off. They had paid me a fair amount of money to be there to support them. And my client needed ice chips. And so I walked out of the hospital room where I was working, and in the hallway was a gurney. Someone had come in on an ambulance, and hanging on the side of the gurney was a pair of handcuffs. And it was an image that really stopped me in my tracks. I had never seen an image like this on labor and delivery. I was there to make sure everyone felt safe and supported. And as I was contemplating that image, the door of the room next to the one I was working in opened up, and an armed guard walked out. And it occurred to me in that moment, there was a woman chained to a bed in the room next to mine trying to deliver a baby. And no one was telling her she was doing a good job. And no one was assuring her that everything would be okay, because in fact, it probably would not be okay. She would probably be separated from her baby hours after birth. And that's the day that my world turned a little upside down. And I started researching pregnancy, incarceration, shackling. And I found that my home state, Georgia, was a place where it was still legal to shackle women. And so I also read Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson on a Stairmaster at a YMCA in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I was here when he was here, and decided that I had a special set of skills. I had legal and policy and childbirth and maternal health, and all of that was funneling me back to Georgia, the state that I loved and considered home, to try to do something about that. So I moved here not to start a nonprofit. I really moved here just to get shackles off of women. And then I started meeting women who had experienced this. And once I started hearing their stories, I couldn't turn away. I'm happy to report that in Georgia, it is no longer legal to shackle women during birth. We passed that legislation, and Governor Kemp signed it in 2019. But the experience still, there's a lot of room to improve. Women are held at one facility in Atlanta when they're pregnant. It's called Helms. It's on right off Memorial Drive. If they are in the Georgia prison system, that's where they are. It's a medical facility. And then when they give birth, they used to all give birth at Atlanta Medical Center. So may it rest in peace. They are now giving birth at Southern Regional Medical Center in Riverdale. So they give birth like anyone else would who was coming into the hospital. They have 2 days there at the hospital. At Atlanta Medical Center, they were separated at 2 hours. So moms went to what they called the inmate floor, which was the basement of the hospital, and babies went to the NICU. At Southern Regional, they don't have that basement floor. So moms and babies stay together for about two days. At that point, the prison system gets the mom and takes her to Lee Arundel State Prison. So she doesn't even go back to Helms to collect her belongings. She may leave the hospital with the same clothes that she came in, one pair of underwear and one pad. And then the baby goes to the NICU. And at that point, the NICU staff opens up a folder, and the mom has filled out a release of liability for the hospital to give the baby to somebody else that's not a custodial parent. And so it's got a name and a phone number, and they call that name and say, there's a baby here to pick up. Now in 2019, when we talked to the hospital, Atlanta Medical Center at that point, they said, we will make that phone call, and they don't know what we're talking about. They didn't know that they were gonna come pick up a baby. Maybe the mom had not been able to call home because she didn't have any money on her calling account. Maybe the mom just wrote down a friend who she thought might be willing to come pick up the baby. But they were hearing when they made that phone call, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no car seat. I have no baby stuff. I guess I'll be there anyway. And they often were. So moms went back to Lee Arundel State Prison, had a very different experience of incarceration there. They were often marched across a mile or two, even with C-section incisions. They were on the third tier of bunks, and no mental health support. We know that physiologically, it would be almost impossible for women not to have postpartum depression when separated from their newborn right after birth. That's not the way our bodies are designed or our brains are designed to work. But they weren't getting any support for that there. So Motherhood Beyond Bars in 2019 went into Lee Arundel State Prison, went into Helms, and all of our programming happened inside the jails. And what we did in the prisons, what we did was really center the identity of motherhood for these women. They were called a lot of things. They were called numbers, last names, if they were lucky, never mom, mother, mommy. We really wanted to center that identity and remind them that there was someone on the outside waiting for them. And this is what we had imagined would happen when they got out. So they'd be joyfully reunited with their child. That would be the last time anyone saw the inside of a prison wall again. And then we started talking more and more in our childbirth education classes to the women. And what we started to hear from our women inside was they were so relieved that their mom had come to pick up the baby. Loved, so grateful. At about the 6-month mark, we started to hear these moms say, I don't think she's taking very good care of my baby. Every time I call home, the baby is crying. I think I'm going to move the baby to someone else. She's really mad at me. She won't give me any information. And over and over and over again, we heard, and she's not changing the baby's diaper. The baby's got diaper rash every time. Every time I call, the baby has diaper rash. And so what we started to see was an absolute fraying of relationships. And when I tell you that we really centered relationships in the work that we were doing, we were just seeing this all dissolve. So moms may be coming out of prison soon and have nowhere to go because now the caregiver, the person that had their baby, is really mad at them, and the baby's living with someone else, and she didn't know what side was going to be up or down. And the women inside prison had always asked us for two things. They said, please help take care of my baby because I've asked a lot from my family member, and help me reunite with my child when I come home. And the problem with that was the Department of Corrections gave us two rules. Basically, one, you cannot talk to any family members of a person that's in here, and you're not allowed to work with a woman in this program once they get out. We're afraid you're going to manipulate them to do something when they come out. The rules I thought didn't make a lot of sense. They thought family members we would start to build a relationship with, and then we would bring in contraband for the family members. Then in 2019, with a little help from the Department of Corrections, who it turned out started to not like me very much, we decided that we would listen to what the women had asked us for. And they had that taking care of the baby and reuniting with their children. And so we started exploring a little bit more about what happened to the infants. We had heard women tell us, well, my mom's coming to pick the baby up from the hospital. I put her name on there, but she can't do it. So she's going to give the baby to my aunt in the parking lot. And sure enough, that's what was happening. Another mom of twins, Brianna, said, my sister's coming to pick up my twins. And then a couple weeks later, we found out that her sister had been at a coffee shop when a woman at the table next to her said, it looks like you're really struggling. I'd like to help out. If you want to give the babies to me for the weekend, I'll give you some respite care. The babies lived with that stranger from a coffee shop for 4 years. No one had any idea where these babies were, except for me and Brianna and the stranger from the coffee shop. So we started our infant and caregiver support program, and it really began with a promise that every baby that left the hospital would have all of the items that they needed to be safe in the first few weeks of life. And that included a safe place to sleep, clothing, formula, diapers, and wipes. And then we made another promise to the caregivers who came to pick up the baby and the moms. You will never need to buy a pack of diapers for this baby. We will ship a supply of diapers to your doorstep. You won't have to go to a diaper bank for as long as you need them. We only ask for one thing, and that's that we talk to you, because I don't want to send newborn diapers when the baby's now in size 1. That's a giant waste of money. And so these diapers became immediately the carrot that allowed us to build relationships with the caregivers. And we spend $55,000 on diapers this year because it is more than a diaper. And when I tell you that the women who told us that their babies always had diaper rash, they were right, because 1 in 2 families can't afford enough diapers to keep their babies safe and dry. And that is always an out-of-pocket expense. There's no social service program that will allow you to buy diapers with food stamps or WIC, women and infants and children. So when we send diapers, it's a direct cash payment to these families. We also wanted to help where we could, the fraying of that relationship between the mom and the caregiver. But every form of communication from prison costs money. So if someone doesn't have enough money, they don't get to talk to one another. We pay for all of the communication between the caregiver and the mom. So we put $30 on every caregiver's account every month so that the mom and the caregiver can stay in touch with one another. And the mom can find out about that pediatrician visit. The mom can find out if the baby took their first steps or learned how to sit up. Those are powerful pieces of information that keep a mom connected to her child and keep the caregiver and the mom in touch over time. Every email costs money, and most people don't understand that. If you send an email into someone, it's 35 cents. And if you want a response from them, you also have to pay the 35 cents for that response. So every email exchange is 70 cents. So our holistic family support program provides tangible items. car seats, safe place to sleep, diapers. But over and over again, our families tell us that the most important thing we do is answer the phone. When I tell you how many phone calls we get, and I answer the phone and someone cannot believe they're talking to a real person on the other end, it happens over and over and over again. And so those relationships, when I asked my staff this week, what are really the two most important things that we do? Over and over, I mean, just they said, we talk, we listen, we problem solve, we get to know each other, we trust each other. And the second thing was diapers. Diapers actually make a huge difference in these families' lives. We continue to keep in touch with the moms. So we're planning for reentry from the minute we meet a mom. And then we coordinate all of the services that she needs, usually like in a bundle of services once she gets out. And these are some pictures of some families that we are supporting right now. These are unrelated caregivers. So the mom didn't even know these people before she chose them to be the caregivers. It was a friend of a friend of a friend. This mom will be away a long time, and we are slowly building a relationship with these caregivers and little baby Loriana. So she will have a stable, these will be her parents for as long as she wants them. And the mom will continue to stay involved in her life. This is a dad who was one of the caregivers, and now the whole family reunited. This is, oh, isn't he cute? This is River. When this mom was released from jail, I didn't know her. We didn't work in jails at that point, but someone had told her to reach out to us. When I met her for the first time, she was living in a friend's apartment. The electricity had just been turned off. And she and River, who was probably only 5 months at this point, were both sleeping on a couch together, which we know is very dangerous for young children to sleep on couches with another person. And so we delivered a car seat and a crib and a pack and play, and then we stayed in touch. And we actually also rented a U-Haul van when she moved into a new apartment and took her stuff with her. And look at, I mean, just absolutely thriving now. This is my friend Melody, and I was there when this little baby was born. She was in Fulton County Jail. I got out. I picked her up from the front doors of the jail. She was about a month from her due date, and then I was with her at Grady Hospital when she gave birth to Chance. And this is her mom and her older two children. Birth Beyond Bars study, and this has been an exciting week. We are aiming to fill in the gap for some of the data and knowledge about infants born to people in prison and mothers. This week, we had our very first academic article in a peer-reviewed journal published based on this study. For 4 years now, we've been collecting data with our friends at Harvard School of Public Health on mothers, infants, and caregivers. And what we've learned is that our average caregiver is about 44. The race of the people that we're working with, 50% are white, 30% are Black. That surprises people sometimes. Women in prison, just by raw numbers, the women in Georgia prisons are majority white. Black women are very overrepresented, however. So we know that there's overrepresentation of Black women. 31% of our caregivers live below the federal poverty limit. And this is a real problem because we know that one of the risks for child welfare involvement is not an abuse, it's actually poverty. And so when these families do not want to get involved with DFACS or the child welfare system or foster care, they want to be completely off the radar. It's because they understand that if they are poor, their kids are more likely to be taken. And this has been borne out over and over again. This is a grandmother. This is actually a great-grandmother who's been taking care of her little boy. And this is an adoptive mother. So the woman that's in prison is actually this woman's next door neighbor, and chose her to be the caregiver of this little boy, and then decided as a family that it would be a permanent placement and adoption, and the mother was in favor of that. And they all have a wonderful relationship where they stay in touch with one another now. So while our goal is reunification of mom with her children, how that looks can be different for every family. And in this case, we have a mother who continues to be a part of her son's life, even though she chose the option of giving him permanency with this family. One of the things that we're really watching with this study is infants, how many times they change hands in their first few years of life. Because every one of the infants born to someone in prison is born with an adverse childhood experience. And we're hearing a lot more about that these days. That's one of the little check marks on your box that can lead to a lifetime of troubles, not just mental, but physical. We also know that change in primary caregiver is another ACE. A lot of our babies are changing hands. That's one of the things. All of our support is geared towards giving the family enough support, the caregiving family enough support, so they don't feel overwhelmed and need to do that. But there are some of the reasons why our infants have changed hands. I can tell you that the least productive placement in terms of babies changing hands is foster care. So if a child goes into foster care from birth, they are more likely to have multiple primary caregivers than even when a friend of the mom, and we do have one caregiver that is a bunkmate from county jail. She didn't know her, went into county jail, met this woman. The woman said, I'm getting out before you are. I'll be happy to take care of your baby. That's one of the caregivers we're supporting. And what our research shows is that that kind of placement is more stable for children than even foster care. These are some of the moms, some of the statistics that we've seen on moms. And you can see that when they come out, they are not in fantastic shape. 69% of them are unemployed, 25% of them, and this is actually quite high. People tend to, when they are being asked about their mental health, they tend to be sunnier about the situation. For 25% of them to report poor emotional or moderate mental health concerns is a really high number. There's River again. I encourage you to learn more about us. We've got a website, we've got some social media, and I know that we have time for questions right now. So in 20 minutes or so, it's hard to describe everything we do, but maybe you all can dig in a little bit more to some of the things that I left out. Hi, John.
Thank you for your presentation. Can you give us some numbers on your organization, budget, staff?
Yeah. So first, the most important number to me is the number of infants that we serve. 254 babies across Georgia right now. Some of them are in other states. If I were to have been talking to you at this point last year, the number would have been about 111. So a tremendous amount of growth over the last year. There are 6 of us that work at Motherhood Beyond Bars, and I had my first interview for another position yesterday. So there are 4 program staff. I have an executive director, 3 program staff right now. An important way that I am committed to growing the organization is with directly impacted women. So my director of operations is formerly incarcerated, spent 8 years in Georgia prisons. 2 of the other 3 program members are formerly incarcerated and have gone through a program that allows them to be certified peer specialists. And this is Georgia is ahead of the curve, I mean, it's always nice to be able to say that Georgia is standing out for a great reason. But Georgia really has built a program that trains people with addictive disease and mental health to be certified peers. And you will find certified peers at Grady Hospital, at a lot of mental health clinics. Motherhood Beyond Bars hires them as well. And I am proud that we pay better than almost any other organization in the state for certified peer specialists. Our budget this year is about $580,000. We just changed to our fiscal year changed. So now we have an 18-month budget instead of a 12-month budget. And the majority of our funding comes from individuals and from family foundations. In this area, we have one government grant through the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, which supports certified peer specialists. So they're paying us because we are hiring certified peer specialists. And then I did apply for the Opioid Trust Fund. So the opioid money that is coming into Georgia and a lot of states, I call it dirty opioid money, and we're here to launder it. I applied for a grant there to expand our work in jails. So right now we work in Fulton County and Cobb County Jail. We know that opioid use among pregnant women, that is one of the most at-risk populations for death and overdose. There are pregnant women. Right now, we are the only organization in the state that is able to get into jails and work with that specific population. And so I'm hopeful that we're a good fit for that opioid money. Yesterday, they asked me for my bank account information, so I'm hopeful that means we're getting it. Did that answer? Yeah. Right.
Without your organization in a state like Georgia, where do these children go? Straight into foster care? And then secondly, I mean, what kind of penetration do you all have? Do you all have pretty much a shot at most children that you know are going to be born in the prison system in Georgia?
We've enrolled, I would say 98% of the babies born in the Georgia prison system.
Wow.
Every once in a while, there's someone that comes into the prison system very pregnant, gives birth, baby goes into foster care, and we don't find out about them. That's very rare. It is, even before we started this program in Georgia, there is really no relationship between DFACS or the child welfare system and these families unless they have a prior case. So the example that I give often is that if I knew that my work was going to take me away for a year from my home and I had a young infant, I would not expect the foster care system to step in or have any reason to look at my family if I knew that my mom could take care of my baby while I was gone. And that would be a private arrangement between the two of us. That's the way the system looks at incarceration of the mom at this point, is that this can be a very private arrangement between you and, it turns out, anyone. If you know your mailman's name and number, you could put it on that piece of paper, and that is the only person that the hospital could release the baby to protect them. But there's no one coming to do a home check. There's no one coming to check in. We don't think that that part is bad. What is bad is that these family caregivers get none of the support that foster families would get. So there's no financial remuneration.
Okay.
There's no case manager that's helping them apply for WIC or SNAP or food stamps. They walk in to the hospital, pick up a baby, and walk out, and then are supposed to figure it out from there. Motherhood Beyond Bars, when we started this in 2020, we are the only organization in the state, and actually the only organization in the country, doing this immediate, from their first breath support for infants born to women in prison. And it's a model that I think could be expanded to other states.
Yeah.
I know my wife is going to be interested in supporting. Are you going to leave us with some cards or flyers? I don't want to say in front of my friends that I can't read that.
Yes, I will. I'd be happy to.
That's it.
From your experience dealing with the criminal justice system, dealing with how our society works, what would you wish for that we would do as a society and a government?
Mm-hmm. Danielle's story was very, it illuminated a lot of possibilities for me, because when Danielle went in to the prison the first time, was separated from her baby 2 hours after birth, had to find a caregiver who ended up being the paternal grandmother, a lot of animosity, family was torn apart, and Danielle fell back into addiction. The second time this story occurred, Danielle called. We found an alternative to prison. We found a treatment center that had a lot of rules around it. She couldn't just walk in and walk out. A lot of supportive services for her and her child that were ongoing even after she graduated the system. And the story ended so differently, so differently. So if we could avoid the separation of moms and babies at that moment of birth, which we know is traumatic for moms and for babies, put them onto another path, which is supportive services, things would be transformed. The problem is that we couldn't find women in those jails before they stood in front of a judge. So you have to be able to find the women in the jails, and we don't do the data collection. There's no way for me to figure out who's there other than walking into the jails, which is what I have decided to do. And then identify women who are good candidates for diversion. Not everyone that you meet in the jail is going to be a great candidate for that. But the women who have substance use disorders, we know they're not getting help in prison, and the judges know that too. And then you have a little time to work with their public defender, take that case to the prosecutor, and then when you stand in front of the judge, offer an alternative. We have a 100% success rate in that scenario with diverting women from prison and into treatment. 100%. People are anxious for another alternative, but it's educating the entire system. And then we will run out of beds in those treatment facilities. I know every single one of them in the state. I stay in very close contact with Hope House in Augusta and Mary Hall Freedom and Mothers Making a Change. Any place there's a bed, I know about it because I try to claim it. So then we'll need a tremendous infusion of cash and support into mental health treatment facilities and substance use treatment. One of the problems, and this, a parole officer called me yesterday with a pregnant woman who, my first question, and it's a weird one to be disappointed by when they say no. I said, does she have a substance use disorder? And the parole officer said, no, she's just got mental health. And it's terrible to say, oh, that's terrible, because I have no place to send her if she doesn't have a substance use disorder. We don't have enough treatment facilities just for someone who needs mental health treatment. And so the things that I would change are diversion for the women that we can change, and a significant increase in the number of residential treatment programs for women with children.
So it sounds like to me like you're pretty much dealing with the women at the jails instead of, when you keep saying prisons, and I'm thinking the prison system. So what about the women that are in the prison system? Are you able to catch them before they're getting to the prison
majority of the women that we work with are in prison, the Georgia prison system. They're easier to find because all the pregnant women are in one facility, and there's more data online about who's there. So the majority of the women that we're working with have been sentenced already and are in Georgia prisons. We are now in 2 jails, and there are 159 in the state, so it's a lot. Where we're trying to catch them before they get sentenced to prison. But the vast majority of those 250 something babies that we're supporting right now have a mom in prison.
Does your organization give drug tests to your clients?
No. Mm-mm. And most of our clients currently are in prison, so we wouldn't be able to access them. The caregivers would be another client of ours, and we don't drug test the caregivers.
Maybe I missed it, but what's the likelihood that a child who is born in prison ends up in prison themselves?
The statistic is 33%. So 33% of the babies born in prison may end up there again. And some of that is it's a causal relationship. So because they were born to someone in prison, they are more likely to end up in prison. The thing that we know is that the research that has been done once children are in elementary school. We start to see impacts like mental health issues, trouble learning in school, more juvenile justice involvement. The research has never looked at interventions prior to the time that a child is in elementary school, which is, I think, the real power of the research that we're doing, is that we're capturing infants from the moment they're born, and we're following through with them. Now we'll go up to 5 years with that child. So by the time they enter school, our research will end and other research will pick it up. But we are looking at the kinds of supports that you can give to infants and families that change the trajectory of that child's life. And we believe you have to start from the moment of birth, that by the time they get into elementary school, all of those all those worst case scenarios have been in some sense baked in. And it's a sad thing to think about as a 5-year-old that your life has been set at this point. We think we can provide supports early, specifically to the family and to the mom, that make those things not set in by the time they're 5.
Are there any questions on Zoom? Any Zoomers? John? Yeah.
Amy, a group of us toured Jackson State Prison several years ago. And at the beginning, an official, I forgot his title. I don't think it was the warden, but he was speaking to us. And the statistics that stuck with me, he said a common denominator of all his inmates was more than 50% had gone through the foster care program. And so I think anything you can do to avoid the foster care program probably is a very good thing.
Yep. Yeah, I would say we have, when I talk about our 3 most important goals, 1, make sure infants are safe. That means a car seat, safe place to sleep, that they have the physical items that they need to be safe from the minute they leave the hospital. 2, avoid unnecessary foster care entry. And that means that we never want a child to end up in foster care because the caregiver didn't have enough money to keep them. When the caregivers respond to this research, they tell us that diapers are one of the reasons they feel like they can keep that child, and not the financial burden of the diapers doesn't toss their family off a cliff. And so, when we talk about the power of diapers, yes, it is important for babies to have diapers. We believe it's directly responsible for babies staying out of foster care. And then you see what happens down the road and keeps them out of prison. I mean, as simple as a diaper, as simple as a diaper. And then the third thing is the reunification, meaningful reunification of mom with her children when she comes home.
I think we have time for one more question. Anyone have a question? Hearing none. Amy, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you so much.
Being overindulgent grandparents, we got multiple porta cribs that have barely been used.
Fantastic. I will take those.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we could work and just do like a little, let me talk to the folks here and just have like an infant stuff day one day. And then like I can pull up in my minivan and load it up. Yeah. Yeah. We have a storage unit. I was there yesterday with grandmother that's the baby's due in December, and she just came shopping at the storage unit. So, and that's when I realized like, hey, we're getting a little low on some things. So I'm careful about asking for stuff because all of a sudden I need a U-Haul.
Right.
Right.
Something is seemingly mundane as diapers. It's 10% of your budget.
Yes, yes.
And what a ministry, what a gift.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's right.
Yeah. Diapers are a big deal. And I don't do as many diaper drives because the amount of time, for the 4 staff that I have to sort through diapers and then ship them back out. If someone gives me money, I can go to Costco and it delivers to their doorstep the next day. And so we order diapers on the 1st and the 15th. Everybody knows exactly when the diapers are showing up. There's regularity, there's enough for the month, and it's, they don't have to go somewhere to pick them up. And at that, that burden, and it's also just a dignified, they're not going to a diaper bank and getting 35 diapers in a plastic bag. They're getting enough for the month, every month. Yeah.
Any of this pre-recorded?
Pre-recorded.
Yeah, this is recorded.
This is recorded. Oh, yeah.
But your other work, is it recorded so it's accessible?
On our website, which is, yes, here, there are a couple of videos that live on that website, and you can, yeah.
My daughter's.
Oh, great. Yeah. And my email and phone, she can just get in touch with me if she wants to talk about it.
Can't all be winners.
I'll send you this for a card.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
That was a Denison wedding as well.
Really?
Small world, isn't it?
Small world. There's your card, sir. Oh, that's one. Yeah, it is a small world. Thank you. All right.